The first domino fell the day Naomi Marshall sent me that text with the champagne emoji. We're in. Investor meeting successful. Drinks tonight to celebrate? I should have known then. Naomi always celebrated before she had reason to. I stood in the middle of the airport terminal scrolling through my phone, searching for any trace of her. Around me, the frantic energy of Malé International Airport swirled, sunburned tourists eager to start their Maldivian getaways, airport staff efficiently directing the flow of human traffic. None of them knew that I'd just spent my entire life savings to track down a ghost. My name is Harper Sinclair, and 6 months ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I trusted my best friend with $200,000. Anything? I glanced up from my phone to see Kyle, my brother, holding 2 bottles of water. His face was flushed from the heat, concern etched across his features. He'd insisted on coming with me, leaving his wife and kids back in Chicago while we chased a woman who had methodically constructed her own disappearance. Nothing. Her last Instagram post is still that sunrise from 3 months ago, I said, accepting the water. You know, the one where she quoted Thoreau about living the life you've imagined. Kyle's expression darkened. She's sure living someone's imagined life, all right. Yours. I took a sip of water, trying to cool the rage that had been simmering inside me since the day I realized my childhood best friend, my maid of honor, my confidant, my business partner, had methodically drained our joint business account before vanishing without a trace. The same woman who'd sobbed in my arms when her mother died, who'd helped me rebuild after my divorce, who'd convinced me that our friendship was strong enough to withstand a business partnership. The receptionist at the Anantara Kahava confirmed she checked in 3 days ago, I said, scrolling through my emails for the 10th time. She's here, Kyle. I can feel it. Harper. Kyle's voice softened. I know you need this to be true, but we should prepare ourselves for the possibility that our intel was wrong. That she's moved on already. That. No. I cut him off, meeting his gaze directly. I know Naomi. She gets comfortable when she thinks she's won. And she thinks she's won. I pulled up the photo on my phone, the one that had led us here. A grainy image of a woman in oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, lounging on an overwater bungalow in what could only be the Maldives. The private investigator I'd hired had found it buried in the Instagram account of a Russian oligarch's son, tagged with the resort name but no individual identifiers. It wasn't much, but the distinctive rose-gold watch on her wrist was unmistakable. I'd helped Naomi pick it out last year as a 40th birthday present to herself. Our water villa is booked for a week, I continued, shouldering my bag. If she's still here, we'll find her. And if not, we'll find where she went next. Kyle just nodded, falling into step beside me as we headed toward the seaplane terminal. He didn't need to ask what I planned to do when we found her. He'd seen the determination in my eyes when I'd sold my car, liquidated my 401k, and taken out a second mortgage on my house to fund this manhunt. The crushing weight of betrayal had transformed into something harder, colder, and infinitely more focused. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about looking into the eyes of someone who had systematically dismantled my life while telling me she loved me like a sister. As our seaplane lifted off the water, skimming over the impossibly blue lagoon, I pressed my forehead against the window and whispered a promise to myself, I'm coming for you, Naomi. Every last penny. Every last lie. The business had been Naomi's idea. Of course it had been. Harper, we're wasting our talents making other people rich, she'd said over brunch, nearly a year ago. You with your marketing genius and me with my connections, we could build something incredible together. I'd been hesitant, having just landed a comfortable position as marketing director for a respected firm after years of climbing the corporate ladder. But Naomi had always possessed an infectious enthusiasm, a way of making her dreams seem not only possible but inevitable. It's a tech platform that connects high-end interior designers with ethically sourced artisans around the world, she'd explained, her dark eyes sparkling with excitement. The artisans get fair pay, the designers get unique pieces with a story, and we take a reasonable commission. Everyone wins. The business plan had seemed solid. The market research impeccable. The ethical angle genuinely inspiring. And more than anything, I'd wanted to believe in something again after my divorce had left me questioning my own judgment. "We'll be equal partners," Naomi had promised, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. 50-50, all the way. "I've already got interest from investors, but we need initial capital to build the platform. I can put in 100,000. Can you match it?" It had taken nearly everything I had, my savings, a loan against my house, even selling some family jewelry, but I'd done it. I'd trusted her enough to put it all on the line. For 3 months, Artisan Collective had seemed to be taking shape. Naomi handled the finances and investor relations while I built the branding, marketing strategy, and website. We'd even signed contracts with several artisan collectives in Peru, Morocco, and Indonesia. Then came the text with the champagne emoji. The excited phone call about an investor who wanted to come in big, but needed us to move fast. The wire transfer to the new business account Naomi had set up for security purposes. The growing silence thereafter. By the time I realized something was wrong, Naomi had been gone for 2 weeks. Her apartment emptied, her phone disconnected, her social media dormant except for that single, mocking Thoreau quote, "Go confidently in the direction of your dreams. Live the life you've imagined." The police had been sympathetic but unhelpful. "This looks like a civil matter," they'd said, reviewing the business contracts that gave Naomi full legal access to our shared accounts. The fact that I'd willingly transferred the money made it nearly impossible to pursue criminal charges. That's when I'd hired the private investigator, a former FBI agent named Diana who specialized in financial fraud cases. "People who steal this kind of money usually have patterns," Diana had told me during our first meeting. "They need a safety net. They leave breadcrumbs, even when they think they're being careful." It had taken 4 months, but Diana had found the thread, a pattern of transfers to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, then to a private bank in Switzerland, and finally to a resort in the Maldives. Diana had also uncovered evidence that Naomi had pulled similar schemes before, under different names in different states, careful to stay just under the thresholds that would trigger federal investigations. "She's smart," Diana had admitted. "But she's also human. And humans need pleasure, comfort, validation. That's usually how they get caught." Now, as the seaplane glided toward the pristine resort island, I wondered what comfort had been worth destroying our friendship. What pleasure justified the calculated decimation of my financial security? What validation could possibly compensate for the night I'd sat on my bathroom floor, hyperventilating at the realization that I had nothing left? The crystalline waters below seemed to mock me with their tranquility. Somewhere down there, Naomi was lounging in paradise, drinking cocktails purchased with my future. "We're almost there," Kyle said, nodding toward the approaching island. "What's the plan once we land?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the documents in my bag, the proof Diana had gathered, the records of transfers, the evidence of Naomi's previous identities and frauds. "First, we check in and get settled. Then we scout the resort, discreetly," I replied, reciting the strategy I'd rehearsed 1,000 times. We need visual confirmation before we make any moves. Once we're certain it's her, we approach carefully, in public, but not too public. We don't want to spook her into running. And then? I met my brother's worried gaze. And then I give her a choice: return every penny voluntarily, or I turn everything Diana found over to the FBI, Interpol, and every police department in the jurisdictions where she's pulled this before. Diana thinks there's enough evidence for a federal wire fraud case. That's serious prison time. Kyle nodded slowly. You really think she'll just hand over the money? No, I admitted, watching as the island grew larger in the window. But I think she'll be more afraid of prison than of being broke again. The seaplane touched down on the water with a gentle splash, sending ripples across the turquoise surface. As we taxied toward the arrival jetty, I felt a strange calm settle over me. After months of rage, grief, and desperate planning, I was finally here, just steps away from confronting the woman who had betrayed me in every possible way. The game was about to end. All I needed to do was find her. The Anantara Kahava was exactly the kind of place Naomi had always dreamed of visiting: exclusive, dramatic, and engineered for Instagram perfection. Our water villa was a masterpiece of luxury, with glass floor panels revealing the vibrant coral reef below, a private infinity pool, and steps leading directly into the lagoon. In another life, I would have been awestruck by the beauty surrounding us. Now, I registered it only as confirmation that this was indeed where Naomi would choose to hide. I'm going to do a casual walk around the main areas, I told Kyle as we unpacked. See if I can spot her without being obvious. You should stay here, she's never met you, but two Americans asking questions might draw attention. Kyle paused, a shirt half folded in his hands. You sure that's smart? What if you see her and lose your cool? I won't, I promised, though my racing heart suggested otherwise. This is too important to mess up with emotions. An hour later, I was sitting at the resort's main bar, positioned to observe both the pool area and the path toward the beach. I'd ordered a virgin mojito and made small talk with the bartender, dropping casual questions about how full the resort was and whether most guests were couples or families. Mostly couples this week, he'd replied cheerfully. Some honeymoons, some anniversaries. A few solo travelers too, usually looking for peace and privacy. I'd nodded, wondering if Naomi had crafted a romantic backstory for herself. She'd always been good at creating narratives. It was part of what had made her so successful in business development. People believed the stories she told because she believed them herself, at least in the moment she was telling them. On my third circuit of the resort, I glimpsed her. She was emerging from the underwater restaurant, laughing with a man whose arm was draped casually around her shoulders. Her hair was different, shorter, with honey blonde highlights instead of her natural brunette, but the way she tilted her head back when she laughed was unmistakably Naomi. I ducked behind a large potted palm, my heart hammering against my ribs. Despite all the planning, all the determination, seeing her in person sent a shock wave through my system. This was real. She was here. Living her best life with my money. I watched them stroll along the wooden walkway, heading toward the spa. The man was tall, tan, probably in his 50s, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to wealth. A new mark, perhaps? Or just a vacation fling? When they disappeared from view, I sprinted back to our villa, pulse racing. I found her, I announced, bursting through the door where Kyle was working on his laptop. She's here. With a man. They just had lunch at the underwater restaurant and now they're headed to the spa. Kyle closed his computer, immediately alert. Are you sure it's her? Positive. She's changed her hair, but it's definitely her. I collapsed onto the couch, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of the situation. God, Kyle. She looks happy. Carefree. Like she hasn't destroyed someone's entire life. She hasn't destroyed your entire life, Kyle reminded me gently. Just a significant chunk of your finances. And we're here to fix that. I nodded, steadying my breathing. Right. Okay. So she'll probably be in the spa for at least an hour. That gives us time to prepare. I want to confront her when she's alone, if possible. I can keep an eye on the spa exit while you get your documents ready, Kyle suggested. I'll text you when they're leaving. An hour and 20 minutes later, Kyle's text arrived, they're out. Heading toward the main pool. I gathered my evidence folder and took one last look in the mirror. I'd chosen my outfit carefully that morning, a simple but elegant white sundress that made me look pulled together and confident, not like someone who'd been surviving on ramen and anxiety for months. Taking a deep breath, I headed toward the main pool area, rehearsing my opening line. Direct but not accusatory. Firm but not hysterical. The kind of approach that would be hard to dismiss or escape from in a public setting. I spotted them lounging on adjacent chairs, cocktails in hand, Naomi's back to me as I approached. The man saw me first, his eyes flicking up with the mild interest of someone who notices an approaching stranger but assumes they're headed elsewhere. I stopped directly in front of Naomi's lounger, my shadow falling across her sun-kissed skin. "Hello, Naomi," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Or should I call you Nicole? Or was it Natalie in Colorado? Naomi's body went rigid. For a long moment, she didn't move, as if believing that remaining still might make me disappear. Then, slowly, she lowered her sunglasses, revealing those familiar dark eyes, now wide with shock and something that looked almost like fear. "Harper," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" The man beside her sat up, confusion etched across his face. "Vanessa? You know this woman?" Vanessa. So that was her name here. "I'm surprised she hasn't mentioned me," I replied, not taking my eyes off Naomi. "We're business partners. Or at least, we were until she emptied our accounts and disappeared with the money." "Harper, please," Naomi said, finally finding her voice. She stood up, glancing nervously at the other guests nearby. "This isn't the place to discuss this." "I disagree. I think this is exactly the place." I opened my folder, pulling out the bank statements that showed the systematic draining of our business account. $200,000, Naomi. Everything I had. The man was on his feet now too, looking between us with growing alarm. "Vanessa, what is she talking about?" "Nothing, Richard. It's just a misunderstanding. An old business dispute." Naomi reached for his arm, but he stepped back. "You told me you were an art dealer. That you were here finalizing a major acquisition," he said, his expression hardening. I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. "Let me guess, she needed a small investment to secure the deal. A temporary loan that would be repaid with significant interest?" Richard's face confirmed my suspicion. Another mark. Another scheme in progress. "Who are you?" he demanded. "I'm the cautionary tale you're lucky to meet before you make a costly mistake," I replied, then returned my attention to Naomi. "We need to talk. Now. In private." For a moment, I thought she might run. Her eyes darted toward the beach, calculating escape routes. Then, deflating slightly, she nodded. "Fine. My villa. 10 minutes. She turned to Richard, touching his arm lightly. Richard, I can explain everything. But Richard was already backing away, his expression a mixture of disgust and suspicion. Don't bother. I think I've heard enough. As he stalked off, Naomi turned back to me, her shock giving way to anger. You had no right to ambush me like this. I had every right, I countered, keeping my voice low but firm. You stole my money, Naomi. My future. And I'm here to get it back. Her eyes narrowed, calculating. Or what? I pulled out another document, the dossier Diana had compiled detailing Naomi's previous identities, frauds, and the jurisdictions where she was potentially wanted for questioning. Or I make sure this reaches every law enforcement agency that might be interested in your criminal history. Starting with the FBI's wire fraud division, and ending with the Maldivian police, who I'm sure would be fascinated to learn about the American con artist operating in their tourist paradise. Naomi's face paled beneath her tan. For the first time since I'd known her, she seemed genuinely rattled. Villa 26, she said after a long pause. 10 minutes. Come alone. As she walked away, her shoulders rigid with tension, I felt a strange hollowness where triumph should have been. I had found her. I had the upper hand. But nothing could erase the fundamental truth at the core of this confrontation. The person I had trusted most in the world had calculated my worth and determined that our friendship was worth sacrificing for the right price. And that revelation hurt far more than the missing money ever could. Villa 26 was on the opposite side of the island from ours, accessible via a long wooden walkway that extended over the crystal-clear lagoon. Each step toward confrontation felt simultaneously too fast and too slow. I had texted Kyle my location and a simple instruction: if you don't hear from me in 30 minutes, call resort security. I didn't truly believe Naomi would try anything dangerous, but after months of discovering just how little I knew about my supposed best friend, caution seemed prudent. Naomi opened the door before I could knock. She had changed into a loose white linen dress, her hair pulled back, face scrubbed of makeup. It was a strategic choice, I realized, making herself look vulnerable, authentic, less like the polished socialite by the pool. Come in, she said stiffly, stepping aside. Her villa was identical to ours in layout but personalized with her belongings: a silk scarf draped over a lamp, a stack of novels by the bed, a half-empty bottle of her signature perfume on the vanity. The casual extravagance of her temporary home made my anger flare anew. This luxury had been purchased with my sacrifice. You're looking well, she remarked, pouring herself a glass of water from a crystal carafe. Considering you left me financially ruined? I replied, declining to sit despite her gesture toward the couch. Yes, I suppose I'm doing remarkably well. Naomi sighed, dropping the artificial calm. What do you want, Harper? Money, obviously. But you could have gone to the police without tracking me across the globe. So what else are you after? Revenge? An apology? I want to understand, I said, surprised by the raw honesty in my voice. Before I take everything from you, I want to know why. Was it always a con? From the very beginning? 20 years of friendship, was that all just a long game to set me up? Something flickered across her face, regret, perhaps, or just annoyance at being questioned. No, she said after a moment. Our friendship was real. At least, it started that way. Then why? I pressed, struggling to keep my voice steady. I would have given you money if you needed it. You didn't have to steal it. Naomi laughed, the sound hollow and brittle. Given me money? Out of pity? That's not how this works, Harper. I don't take handouts. No, you just take everything, I shot back. She crossed the room to stare out at the ocean, her back to me. You wouldn't understand. You've always had everything come so easily to you. The perfect family, the perfect education, the perfect career trajectory. Do you have any idea what it's like to always be scrambling, always one step away from disaster? Are you serious right now? I couldn't contain my incredulity. My perfect life? My parents died when I was 23, leaving me with a mountain of debt. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through graduate school. My perfect marriage ended when I found my husband in bed with his research assistant. I stepped closer, forcing her to face me. But you know all this. You were there for every part of it. You held me when I cried. You helped me pick up the pieces. So don't you dare try to rewrite our history to justify what you did. Naomi's expression hardened. Fine. You want the truth? The business was failing before it even started. The investors I told you about, they never existed. I had debts, serious ones, to people you don't want to know about. When you agreed to put in your $200,000. She shrugged, the gesture almost casual. It was too perfect an opportunity to pass up. The calculated coldness of her admission stole my breath. So there was never any real business plan? The artisans, the platform, it was all a lie? The idea was solid, she replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her tone. Just economically unfeasible. The market research showed that. What market research? The reports you showed me. Were projections I created, yes. She met my gaze defiantly. Look, I'm not proud of it. But I needed out of a situation, and you had resources you weren't using. Wasn't using? I repeated, stunned by her audacity. That was my life savings, Naomi. My home equity. Everything I had. She had the decency to look away then. I know. And for what it's worth, I am sorry. I never meant for it to be you. But when the opportunity presented itself. You mean when you created the opportunity, I corrected. When you carefully crafted an elaborate scheme to exploit our friendship and steal everything I had worked for. Naomi didn't deny it. Instead, she walked to a sleek suitcase on the luggage rack and pulled out a leather portfolio. I figured this confrontation would happen eventually. That's why I kept this. She handed me a document, a transfer receipt for $150,000 to an account in the Cayman Islands. That's what's left, she said quietly. The rest is gone, expenses, this trip, paying off some debts. Take it. The account details are all there. Consider it a settlement. I stared at the paper, torn between desperate relief and renewed fury. A settlement? You steal $200,000 and offer back 3/4 as some kind of generous gesture? It's what I have, Harper. Take it or leave it. But if you go to the authorities, I promise you'll never see a penny. I looked at her, really looked at her, trying to reconcile this calculating stranger with the woman who had been my closest confidant for 2 decades. The woman who had known my deepest fears and greatest hopes. The woman I had trusted with everything. You know what the worst part is? I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It's not the money. It's that I've spent the last 6 months questioning every moment of our friendship. Every conversation. Every shared secret. Wondering if any of it was real, or if I was just the longest con you ever ran. For the first time since I'd arrived, something like genuine emotion crossed Naomi's face. It wasn't all a lie, Harper. I did care about you. Just not enough, I replied, taking the transfer document and placing it carefully in my folder. Not enough to choose our friendship over this. I turned to leave, suddenly desperate to be anywhere but in her presence. At the door, I paused, remembering the question that had haunted me since I discovered her betrayal. Was it worth it? I asked, not turning around. Gaining all this, but losing the one person who would have done anything for you? The silence stretched between us, heavy with 2 decades of shared history and one devastating betrayal. I don't know yet, she finally replied, her voice suddenly small. Ask me again in 10 years. I left without another word, the door closing behind me with a soft click that somehow felt more final than any dramatic slam could have been. Outside, I leaned against the railing of the walkway, breath coming in gasps as the emotional weight of the confrontation hit me all at once. The transfer document in my folder represented survival, enough to pay back most of my debts, to start rebuilding. But it couldn't restore my faith in humanity, my ability to trust. Some losses couldn't be measured in dollars. My phone vibrated with a text from Kyle, "Everything okay?" I stared at the message, unsure how to answer. Was I okay? Would I ever be, knowing that 20 years of friendship had been casually discarded for a temporary financial gain? Before I could respond, another message appeared. Resort security just showed up at our villa. They're looking for us. I frowned, puzzled, then felt a sudden chill of realization. Naomi. I turned back toward Villa 26, but it was too late. The door was open, the villa empty. She was gone, likely slipped out the moment I left, using resort security as a diversion to buy herself escape time. Sprinting down the walkway, I searched frantically for any sign of her, but the resort was too large, with too many hiding places and exit points. She had disappeared again. The transfer document suddenly felt heavy in my folder. Was it real, or just another delaying tactic? Would the account even exist, or would I find myself chasing yet another ghost? Back at our villa, Kyle was trying to calm a very agitated security officer who was demanding our immediate departure from the resort. There must be some mistake, I interjected, approaching them. We're registered guests. We've done nothing wrong. We received a report that you have been harassing another guest, making threats, the officer replied stiffly. This is a serious violation of our guest policies. Naomi's parting gift. Of course. The person making that claim is a criminal, I started to explain, reaching for my evidence folder, but the officer held up his hand. I am not here to adjudicate disputes. The management has made its decision. You have 1 hour to pack your belongings and vacate the premises. A seaplane has been arranged for your departure. After he left, Kyle turned to me, his expression grim. I take it the meeting didn't go well? I sank onto the couch, the adrenaline of the past hours leaving me suddenly exhausted. She gave me this, I said, showing him the transfer document. Then set security on us as a diversion while she escaped. Kyle examined the paper, his brow furrowed. Do you think it's legitimate? I don't know, I admitted. But it's all I have. As we packed our belongings, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger at being outmaneuvered again, relief at having something to show for our journey, and a profound sadness that lingered beneath it all. On the seaplane back to Malé, I gazed down at the receding paradise, wondering if Naomi was on another plane headed in a different direction, or if she had merely relocated to another villa, another name, another mark. What now? Kyle asked, breaking my reverie. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to Diana's number. First, We verify if this transfer is legitimate. If it is, I secure the funds before she can retract them. If not, we keep looking. Kyle studied me for a moment. And if it is real? If you get the money back? Will that be enough? I considered his question, watching the islands below grow smaller, turning into mere specks in the vast blue expanse. Not enough to erase what happened, I finally replied. But enough to start over. And right now, that's all I can hope for. As we soared above the clouds, leaving behind both Naomi and the person I'd been when I trusted her, I realized that some journeys end differently than we expect. I had come to the Maldives seeking complete restitution and emotional catharsis. I was leaving with neither, just a partial recovery and the painful knowledge that some betrayals can never be fully understood or resolved. But I was also leaving with something I hadn't anticipated, the first step toward reclaiming my life. Not the life I'd had before, but something new, built on hard-won wisdom and a fierce determination to never again let someone else define my worth. Perhaps that was victory enough, for now. 3 months later, I stood in the empty commercial space, sunlight streaming through the large windows. The transfer had been legitimate, $150,000, now safely in my account. Not everything I'd lost, but enough to clear most of my debts and fund a modest new beginning. So what do you think? The realtor asked, watching me pace the perimeter of the room. It's smaller than you initially wanted, but the location is prime. I nodded, envisioning what the space could become. It's perfect, actually. More manageable for a solo operation starting out. After returning from the Maldives, I'd made a decision. Instead of trying to rebuild my previous life, I would create something entirely new, a marketing consultancy specializing in ethical small businesses, leveraging my corporate experience for clients who actually deserved support. No partners. No investors. Just me, my skills, and my hard-won understanding of both human nature and business integrity. I'll take it, I told the realtor. When can I move in? As she outlined the lease details, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Probably another client inquiry, I thought, excusing myself to check. The subject line stopped me cold, neither of us won. From an anonymous email account, the message was brief. Harper. I've been thinking about your question. Was it worth it? The answer is no. I gained temporary financial freedom but lost the only person who truly knew me. The money is almost gone already. Turns out paradise is expensive, and loneliness even more so. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, and you're better off without me in your life. But I wanted you to know that I do understand what I threw away, and I live with that knowledge every day. For whatever it's worth, which I realize isn't much. N. I stared at the screen, a complicated tangle of emotions rising within me, vindication, lingering anger, and a whisper of the grief I'd been carrying for the friendship I'd thought was real. For a moment, I considered responding. Telling her about my new business, my slow journey toward rebuilding. Asking where she was, what identity she was using now, whether she was running another con or trying to create a legitimate life. Instead, I deleted the email. Some chapters needed to remain closed. Miss Sinclair? The realtor's voice pulled me back to the present. Are you ready to sign? I looked around the empty space once more, seeing not what it was but what it would become. My space. My business. My future. Yes, I replied, feeling a sense of certainty I hadn't experienced in nearly a year. I'm ready. Outside, the city hummed with activity, indifferent to my personal reckonings. Life continued, with or without closure, with or without complete justice. The trick, I was learning, was to move forward alongside it, wiser, more cautious perhaps, but not paralyzed by the past. As I signed the lease, I thought about trust, how easily it could be broken, how painful the consequences, but also how necessary it remained for any meaningful life. I would trust again, eventually. Differently, more carefully, but I would trust. That evening, I sat on my small apartment balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. Kyle had called earlier to check in, concerned about the email from Naomi. "Are you okay?" he had asked. "I think I am," I'd replied, surprised to find the words were true. Not because of her message, but in spite of it. Now, as darkness settled over the city, I raised my glass in a silent toast, not to forgiveness or forgetting, but to survival and reinvention. 6 months ago, I had lost everything that I thought mattered. In the painful space that followed, I had discovered what truly did: resilience, self-reliance, the capacity to begin again. Naomi had taken my money, my trust, and a friendship I had valued beyond measure. But she hadn't taken my future. That remained mine to shape, one careful decision at a time. Tomorrow, I would begin setting up my new office. Tomorrow, I would continue building a life that could not be so easily dismantled by another's betrayal. Tomorrow, I would take another step forward, not past the pain, but through it. And that, I realized as the last light faded from the sky, was its own kind of victory.